Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech, and on the bench is a pair of Yamaha NS-690 Mark IIs. That's November Sierra 690, and then again Mark II. So anyways, these came in with a Kenwood receiver about a month or so back. I did a preliminary evaluation on the receiver / amp because I wanted to isolate it from the speakers. Now the complaint was that there was some really bad noise, and intermittent behavior, signal cutting out. I think one or both speakers, crackle, pop, scary noises, that kind of stuff, according to the customer. So he felt that it was related to the speakers and influenced by movement, okay, vibration, whatever, because he had these set up in his living room, and I think they have a hardwood floor, and he said when they would kind of bang on the floor or whatever, that seemed to influence the signal cutting in and out, the noise and all that. But of course, as I mentioned in the evaluation video of the Kenwood, I believe it's a Kenwood 9400 and KR-9400, you know, I put signal in it, monitored things on the scope. I was, you know, messing with all the controls, doing the usual obligatory function testing, and the receiver seemed to be absolutely 100% fine as far as it wasn't producing any scary noises or anything obvious. So I have a feeling there's something going on with these connections, maybe within the crossover circuitry, whatever. I could tell there was some work done on these speakers. There's a different woofer in one of them. So I'm going to start on the backs here and open up the backs here and see what I can see as far as connections on the back before I get to removing the speakers themselves, the drivers, whatever, if it even comes to that. I just want to see what's going on, if there's any obvious connections, if there's something going on that, yeah, you know, just a red flag as to why this thing is making noise and crackle and pop and whatever. Like I said, there was some work done on these speakers before, so I don't know if something was done that shouldn't have been done. We'll see, but that's what I'm going to get to right now. So let me start by getting these covers off. Okay, so I laid the speakers down on their sides here, just to bring them down a little bit lower to the bench, so I can rest these crossovers on the bench and not have them dangling around by their umbilical cords. So, anyways. So yeah, all I'm doing right now is just going through and taking a quick look at connections. That's about it. So just a quick evaluation of physical connections, at least. And let me just flip the screen around so I can see that I'm in frame. So yeah, I'm just doing the obvious stuff, just kind of, you know, probing at these terminals and make sure that everything is stout, nothing's loose and, you know, jiggling around or whatever, and that all the solder joints are okay for starters. Just kind of glancing at the underside, looking at the solder joints, at least the ones that I could see. In order for me to pull this board off, there's 4 screws here. I'd have to desolder some of the coils from the terminals here, and you know, some of these coils here and there and whatever, to get the board to lift off. And you know, I'll probably, well, I don't know for sure yet, but if I have to, I'll end up removing the boards and, you know, removing these coils so that I can test coils if I have to, check these caps and all that. But before I do that, before I move on, and by the way, I've already looked at both of the crossovers, and I didn't want to do that on camera. I'm just explaining what I did. I didn't want to go through and, you know, roll video footage while I'm going through and checking all the little connections and all that. No need. I found that all the connections are looking good. Now, maybe later when I remove the board, if I have to go that route, if I have to remove the board, then I'll roll some more footage and we'll take a look at the traces underneath and all that. I could see pretty good under there as far as the bulk of the solder joints, and they look all right. Some of them look a little bit you know, a little bit, you know, let me just put it this way. They're not real super pretty, but I don't see any cold solder joints, anything that looks cracked or cratered or, you know, real bad. I think that they're doing their job, in other words, like I said. But if I have to remove the board, I'll cross that bridge at that time. One thing I will mention, the inputs here. Around back, I could see the wiring that, you know, feeds those input connectors there, and the terminals, and everything is stout. The wires are on there good. Same with the other crossover. There doesn't seem to be any loose connections as far as that goes. So I don't really know what's going on yet, but I do know, and I mentioned a moment ago, that around front there was some work done. There was another woofer installed, So what I'm going to have to do is start pulling the drivers out from the front and check their connections, and, you know, test the individual drivers, see if one of them or more than one of them are noisy, if there's something going on with the voice coils or something was damaged. I just really don't know yet, but unless there's something going on with some crossover components, you know, maybe these caps, coils, which I doubt. I don't really think so, but I don't know yet until I start testing the individual components if something is producing noise. So anyways, let me I'm going to just pop these back in real quick, spin these around, and start looking at the drivers like I said. So I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so as you can see, I have all the speakers pulled out, drivers pulled out, the high and mid level switches pulled out. I'm checking connections on everything. The only thing that I noticed right off the bat is, okay, so here we are taking a closer look, and the only thing that I noticed was the polarity was reversed on this newer speaker. This is the newer one, obviously I can tell, and they had the red over on the negative, the black on the positive over here. You can see the terminals are marked, so they got these reversed. That typically won't cause a problem that the customer was complaining about with all the crackle and intermittent signal and all that. You reverse the polarities, you'll get a phase reversal, some phase cancellation and all that, but otherwise that shouldn't be causing the problem, again, that the customer was describing. So provided that the wiring, you know, is the color code of the wiring is correct, then yeah, this was incorrect here. And I would imagine that the, you know, wiring, you know, the polarity is okay. Somebody didn't screw that up, hopefully. Over here, the original speaker, they have the red over here on the red side of this strip here, the terminal, and the black one over here, the negative, assuming that, again, the polarities are correct, which I would imagine they are. I know that the terminals here are marked correctly, that this is positive and this is negative. I tested that. So yeah, there's that. So anyways, I'm going through and just checking connections, and the connections themselves actually look okay as far as the speakers are concerned. I've checked the soldering, the connections, everything seems to be okay. Another thing that I noticed was, okay, these, I know it's a little bit darker over here. Let me see if I can get a little more light on the subject and kick up the exposure just a little bit. So these level switches, mid-level and high-level switches, I haven't opened them up yet to take a look inside. The solder joints seem okay, but on one of these, yeah, on one of these switches here, these terminals, and am I in frame? Hopefully I am. Yeah, I'm in frame. A couple of these terminals seem to be a little loose, but I can't tell what's going on the inside. They're like, yeah, this terminal seems a little loose in comparison to, this one's a little loose too. So these two, this one more so, is a little loose. And yeah, these seem a little bit more solid, like they're Yeah, internally they seem a little bit more solid, like there's less movement. Well, this one has some movement to it also. But that may not necessarily be causing the problem. I'm just looking for anything that's loose is the point. And anyways, so let me flip this back around so I can see what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to get some signal into these speakers, and I'm going to start, while I have signal in these speakers, I'm going to go through and wiggle around the different connections and see if I latch onto something. If I find something that, when I'm moving it around one of these connections, like one of these tabs on the switches or whatever, which I doubt if that's a problem, but you never know until you start poking around with these things. So I'm just going to see if there's a connection issue somewhere and I get some crackle or get some cutting out or whatever the case. I'm kind of drawing at straws right now, but not really, in that this is a process that you just have to go through anyways, as far as checking connections and making sure polarity is all good and somebody that was in here didn't screw something up, and these switches and all that. You want to check all the connection points and make sure that there isn't something going on with one of these switches that's causing a problem. If I notice something, especially once I get signal in there and I'm rotating the switches around, tugging on the connection terminals, if I land on something, then great, but I don't know yet. And if everything checks out with all these speakers and the switches, everything is fine, there's no noise being generated via a bad connection or whatever the case, then I need to go back to the drawing board with the crossover circuitry that I was pointing out a while ago and start checking things there and see if I have a problem. Okay, so as I mentioned a moment ago, I was going through and physically checking connections, and I was looking at them under my magnified light as well, and checking connections, and everything was looking good as far as physical connections, other than those speaker wires being reversed on that speaker. But other than a phase reversal issue that would cause, it's not going to produce the type of noise typically that the customer is describing. So the only other thing that I've been doing is sweeping signal through these speakers, one at a time, going back and forth, and everything is looking good there. And I'll just, just for kicks, I'll, run signal through them. Okay, so that kind of stuff back and forth. And while I was sweeping signal through these, I was also going through, once again, manipulating connections and tweaking around with the mid and high level switches, going back and forth, all that stuff. Everything seems to be just fine. Not a single hiccup, no signal cutting out, no crackle, no pop, absolutely stable. And as far as the crossover circuitry is concerned, I could tell that the crossover circuitry is doing what it's supposed to be doing, especially being that I'm sweeping some signal through within the audio spectrum, kind of going back and forth. All of the appropriate frequencies seem to be routed properly to their respective drivers and all that stuff. So the crossover circuitry is doing its job. The only thing that I really have left to do at this point, again, I mentioned that I tested the KR-9400 on its own, isolated from the speakers, and put it through its paces. I ran it under load as well because I was power testing it for a time with the volume at different levels and giving it a good workout, and going through and messing with the switches. I had it on an 8 ohm load and really going through it hard when I was power testing it. That's why I had an 8 ohm load on it during the power testing part of it. So, and the amp was absolutely stable, no problems or whatever the case. So the only thing that I haven't done is tested them back together. In theory, there shouldn't be a problem, being that individually they're doing just fine. So I really don't know, but I'll find out a little bit more when I do the final testing. If not, if everything's behaving okay in the coming days with the speakers hooked back up to the KR-9400 and everything's just fine, then there's really not much I could do if it's not presenting the problem. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and move on and get these speakers, these drivers back in, and get everything buttoned up nice and tight, make sure everything's okay, and get the speakers hooked back up to the amp. Okay, so I'll be back in a bit. All right, so here I am in the home stretch. You see the speakers here put back together, of course, and a moment ago, well, a moment for you guys, but it was the other day for me, I was going through and doing a really thorough job checking all the connections, you know, on the crossover boards, you know, within the crossover circuitry. I had the speakers pulled out. You saw all that stuff. I was running signal through and sweeping signal through these speakers, sweeping the audio spectrum and all that while I was going through and checking connections. That was the purpose of that, by the way, is applying signal so that when I was messing with the connections, I can hear if anything was dropping out or getting fickle, finicky, or crackly or whatever, and everything was looking good. And, you know, messing with the switches and all that, the mid-level, high-level switches, everything was checking out just fine. It was passing all those tests with flying colors. Now, that signal test, sweeping signal through the speakers, well, that was also telling me too, you know, what the crossovers were doing, that the crossover circuitry was doing what it's supposed to be doing and routing the different frequency ranges into the, you know, routing them into the appropriate drivers and all that stuff, and doing the job that a crossover circuit should be doing. And that was all looking good. But of course, that test is fairly limited in that I'm not introducing much power from the function generator as I am when I have the amplifier, you know, kicking music through the speakers at a higher AC voltage level, introducing higher AC voltages, of course, that are being injected via the amplifier into the speaker. So I have the speakers, of course, paired back up with the customer's KR-9400 there. And I've been running music through these since yesterday. Not a single hiccup. Now I'm going to get into that a little bit more. This is going to be one of these talking sessions before I start demoing some stuff, because I have some YouTube music queued up. I'm going to demonstrate a few things. Not only just playing music through them, but I'm going to demonstrate some things. I'm going to move the speakers around and do a few things just to show you guys, even though I'm doing all that, these things are behaving and doing just fine. So I'm going to get into that, but let me talk about this a little bit first, because there's some things that for some of you newer ones that are trying to learn how to go through troubleshoot, go through the process and all that, what you might need to be aware of and what you might need to think through. Although there might be other stuff going on, you know, when it comes to what you're dealing with, but still, this might get you on track with narrowing down some problems. So I'll repeat once more that, as you know, I performed isolated testing of the amp by itself, the speakers by themselves, and now I have them put back together. Okay, so there's that. But also, too, some things that need to be considered is, I talked to the customer yesterday. I let him know what was going on. He was kind of disappointed to hear that everything was working out good on my end, because he wanted me, of course, to experience what he was experiencing. And I told him, I said, hey, you know, I believe you. I'm sure you were experiencing all this, but you may want to check some things on your end. Now, sometimes there could be a problem with a peripheral component, cables, or whatever. So the customer's going to check into that a little bit more. But in addition to that, as I continue talking with the customer, my memory was refreshed a bit about the noise occurring mostly in sync with flicking on the power switch, which I've been doing here, of course, turning the unit on, turning it off. Been doing that repeatedly, which doesn't seem to, you know, induce any type of problems on my end over here. So what could likely be happening, and I was thinking about this a little more, is that on the customer's end, there might be a problem with the mains wiring. I'm thinking probably a loose wire at the receptacle, more than likely, or somewhere in the circuit. And the reason I bring this up is if there is a loose connection when the circuit or receptacle is operating under load, there may be a little bit of arcing going on where, you know, a loose connection exists. And that definitely can introduce snap, crackle, and pop noises into the amp. Yes, you know, the amp's power supply has the main filter caps and all that will filter out the low frequency stuff, you know, the hum and all that, but the higher frequency noise that can be produced by arcing can, again, you know, work its way into the amp. So I'm going to bring that to the customer's attention, because not only is that a problem with, of course, introducing noise, but it can also be a a safety issue, no doubt, a fire hazard or whatever. So anyways, let me go ahead and get on with doing what I'm going to do and play some music and so forth. Okay, so obviously I'm playing music. I'm going to walk over there and I'm going to move the speakers around because remember he felt that there was some issues associated with vibration when he would bang on the hardwood floor. So just pay attention to what I'm doing. And don't worry, it's on a rubber pad, so all you children out there, don't try this at home. I'm a trained professional. I just flicked the power switch off. Remember, he said that it would immediately happen when the power switch was turned on and all that stuff. Now here it is being turned on again. Let the relay engage. Off again. On. Let the relay engage. Okay. And these things sound very nice, by the way. Not a single hiccup. I've been running them and running them. The amp is working fine. Everything's looking good. Okay guys, so there you have it. I think you know what direction I'm going with this. I mean, I tried to reproduce the different scenarios that might be contributors to what the customer was experiencing. And again, not a single hiccup. I think that there's something going on with the customer's house wiring, perhaps, in a receptacle on that circuit. Or again, one of the peripheral components, the cables, something. So time will tell, but as I mentioned already, I'm going to keep testing this for another few days before the customer ends up picking it up. But I have a feeling that everything's going to do just fine. So that's really all I can do. And if the problem's not presenting itself, because I just don't believe, again, that it's the amplifier or the speakers, I think that they're just fine. And there you go. So thank you guys for tuning in. And as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.